Well, hello everyone. This is Gregory Zalfant, and welcome everyone to How to Manage Migration to SharePoint webinar. Let's get started. So before we begin, just a couple of very brief announcements. So I will be doing a lot of demo today, and the demo that you will see is based on SharePoint Online. However, if you have older version of SharePoint or SharePoint installed on premises, the functionality you will see today on the screen is pretty much the same. And moreover, today's topic is really independent of the version of SharePoint you have. I'm hoping that you will be migrating to SharePoint Online, SharePoint 2013, but no matter which version of SharePoint you are implementing, the methodology we're going to be talking about today is kind of, I guess, irrelevant to any of this, and is generic, could be applied in any of the scenarios. Also, I do have a slide deck that I'm displaying on the screen right now, and you can download that slide deck at any point during the next hour or so. So to do that, just go to Handouts section in your control panel and just download a PDF file on your desktop. And the slide deck contains pretty much all the information you're going to see today on the screen, as well as different links to different blog posts that provide additional information that I will be talking about in today's session. So definitely take advantage of that and download the handout at any point during the webinar. It's yours to keep. Also, we do have quite a bit of attendees today. This webinar is pretty much full. That means that everyone is on mute. However, I do want to keep this webinar informal. So if you do have a question, just type your question into the chat window, and I will be monitoring that throughout the session, and I will be more than happy to assist and answer your question during the webinar. I'll also try to have a dedicated Q&A session at the very end, so we can discuss some of your questions there. And lastly, if you have some unique questions, specific questions to your particular environment, you can always send me an email, and I will provide my contact information at the very end. All right, for those of you who have not attended my previous webinars or training sessions, let me formally introduce myself. My name is Gregory Zalfant. I'm an independent SharePoint consultant. I have been using SharePoint for more than 10 years now. Absolutely love the application, absolutely love the tool. I do blog about it on my own website, which I will share a link for at the very end. I blog a lot about best practices, instructions, how to use SharePoint, user training, user adoption, etc. And one unique thing about me is something that separates me from competition is that I only utilize out-of-the-box functionality when I implement SharePoint. So anytime I implement SharePoint for my clients, I only use out-of-the-box functionality to solve their specific business problems. I do not use any code. I do not use any third-party tools. And trust me, unless you're developing some complicated application, there is really a lot of functionality that is available out of the box, available for you as an organization. And also, I own my own consulting company, so what I do for a living, I pretty much help organizations migrate to SharePoint, SharePoint Online these days, and Office 365. I help them provision the sites correctly, I consult on best practices, and I do lots and lots of training, which I will also talk about at the end. So here's the agenda for today. We'll first talk about the implementation approach, so the kind of the high-level approach, and then we'll really spend most of the time in the different phases that usually exist during any SharePoint implementation. And then at the end, like I said, we will dedicate 5 or 10 minutes for your questions. And one thing I want to mention is that what I'm going to describe to you today, my methodology, is not something that's just theory. This is the actual methodology, the actual approach that I use literally daily with my clients when I help implement SharePoint. So this is definitely, has been a very proven method, at least to me and my clients, and hopefully you will be able to take advantage of that and utilize it in your own organizations as well. All right, so one of the biggest misconceptions that exists out there is that you can migrate to SharePoint in a matter of days. People think you can provision 200 sites at once, migrate to 100 gigs worth of data, just plug it in, drag and drop, or plug it into the migration tool, and you're done. And unfortunately, this is not how it works. If you really try to migrate everything at once, if you really don't focus on SharePoint implementation as a whole, and pretty much try to force it and migrate and do everything in a rush, your implementation will fail miserably. And as I will demonstrate it to you a little bit later, your SharePoint implementation is not a technology project. It's a user adoption project. So something definitely to keep in mind. And I wanted to resolve one of the biggest mysteries out there, but trust me, you do not want to roll out your SharePoint in a matter of days. It's really a long-term project. It's a long-term adventure for you in your organization and should be taken seriously. So what is the approach then? So what I usually encourage my clients is the following. It is okay to have a long-term vision, kind of a big vision out there. I'm sure each one of you, you already have a vision for your own organization, how you might build out all the different SharePoint department sites and project sites and external sharing sites, et cetera, et cetera. That's excellent. However, you should not really implement all of the sites at once, as I mentioned previously. I call this, think big, start small approach. So if you have a long-term vision in mind, and hopefully you have a long-term vision for your intranet within your organization, you really should be breaking this long-term vision into small phases. And usually when I say phases or stages, I usually advocate for each phase to be not more than 2 or 3 sites. And in terms of the duration, each stage should not be no longer than 1 or 2 months. So the idea is, if, for example, you decide as stage 1 of the implementation to only implement maybe a home page, a site for HR, and a site for policies, that's it. That should be your scope for phase 1. Like I said, you don't want to implement 10 or 15 sites at once. You really should start small and concentrate and zoom in on these 2 or 3 sites. And the reason we do this is so you're not stretched thin. You use the opportunity to listen to your employees, to your users. You build out the sites correctly, appropriately, and then you have a chance for the next phase to kind of learn based on lessons learned from the previous phase, that you implemented. So that's kind of the phased approach that I advocate. And as I mentioned on this slide, on the previous slide, each phase should be no more than 2 or 3 sites. And in terms of the duration, I always target 1 or 2 months. So the idea is that, if you, let's say, start today, implementing your phase 1 today, then, by early June, you should go live with whatever you have identified in that particular phase. And then you pretty much from that point on, you just repeat the steps and determine what the scope is for the following phase, determine the next 2 or 3 sites, and so on, and provision those. But once again, this is very critical. You should never, ever roll out 15, 20 sites at once, just simply because you will not be able to concentrate on the individual requirements. You will be stretched thin, your users will be stretched thin. So you definitely want to implement in those kind of smaller increments. So what I call this a kind of an internet bottom-up approach. Once again, keep your long-term vision in mind, but start small. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And as I mentioned before, your SharePoint implementation is not about technology. Your SharePoint implementation is about user adoption. The technology piece has been done already. If you're migrating to SharePoint Online, Office 365, guess what? The technology piece is done already. Microsoft did it for you. Microsoft has already installed SharePoint on your servers, not on your servers, I'm sorry, on their servers in the cloud. That part is done. It's your job now to take care of this. It's your job now to make your sites as user-friendly as possible, as easy to use, and as exciting to use to your end users. So once again, you should never just hand off SharePoint implementation to IT department, because it's not just a technology project. It's a project about user adoption. Okay, and I do have a separate webinar. Actually, in a month, I have a webinar in early May, and we focus on user adoption. and the different techniques you might want to take advantage of. So I definitely recommend, if you're interested in that particular topic, to register for my May webinar, and I will have the schedule at the end of the session. All right, now, so here are the phases that you typically go through when you implement and provision those SharePoint sites. Let me mention a couple of things about what you see on the slide. So these are the different phases that exist out there when you implement, when you say, let's say, provision certain sites and migrate documents. In reality, I want to say this, in reality, these phases really occur in parallel. Even though they occur serially here, they're depicted in a serial mode kind of, they all occur really all in parallel. So that's one thing I want to highlight. And on the next following slides, I will dive into each of these phases and explain, what's behind each of these phases, so you get a better understanding of that. All right. Another thing I want to highlight is, remember how I said when you need to split your long-term vision into multiple stages, so you should implement 2 or 3 sites at a time. So you go through these phases for each of these 2 or 3 sites. So let's pretend we, as part of, I guess stage 1, we said, you know what, we are just getting started with SharePoint implementation. Let's create a site, an internet homepage, a department, HR department site, and maybe a site for policies and procedures. So we would take those 3 sites, we would go through all of these phases for these 3 sites, and for the next scope, for the next 2 or 3 sites you're going to implement, we're going to repeat these phases. Okay, so just want to make sure that that is clear to everyone. We are going to be repeating, you're pretty much going to be repeating, going through these phases on different sites you implement. And the reason for that is, as it will become evident as I go through the phases, because each site has different users, employees, different owners. So you really have to repeat all the steps, because each of the sites will have its own unique requirements, data to migrate, etc. Okay. There was just a question that came in about SharePoint. What are the limitations of SharePoint? It's a whole separate topic, and hopefully, I will probably come back to this at the very end of the webinar, just so that we do not take the time right now. But it's a good question, because we definitely need to be aware of the limitations, and I will talk about at the very end. I actually do have a slide about that. Good question. All right, back to presentation. So what I'm going to do now, actually, I'm going to explain what each of these steps mean, and we can talk through each of this in greater detail. So the phase 1 is education. What is this all about? All right. So usually what I notice is that when IT or users get their hands on SharePoint, they just start gathering requirements, they just start creating sites, and that's wrong. And the reason for that is you really need to do an education phase. And let me explain what this is all about. How do you expect your users to come up with requirements for their sites if they don't know what SharePoint is? Believe it or not, many folks have never heard of things like SharePoint or Office 365. They have no idea what these things are. Moreover, if they do, many users think of SharePoint as just another Dropbox, as another file storage or something. So you really need to take the opportunity and educate your users about what are the capabilities of SharePoint, because trust me, I mean, this is right here, this is like 50% of your implementation, because if you need to empower your users and educate them. If you have educated users, they know the capabilities, they know what functionality exists in SharePoint, they know what limitations are, you will have less resistance when it's time to migrate the content or get the requirements, etc. And everyone will be kind of on the same page. And this education phase is extremely critical. I mean, this is the phase where you need to show them what SharePoint is all about. If they have never seen what the tool is about, show them, for example, during this phase, that they can build the intranet homepage for the organization with company-wide, calendar of events, a nice looking slideshow, announcements, useful links, etc. Tell them that each of this, educate them that each of the departments might have a site or two to store their content. And I see the example popping up on the screen right now. And once again, explain to them that they will be able to store their documents, store their tasks, store their events, contacts, all on their SharePoint sites, and show them the examples of how this could be done. Show them how they can organize their documents using metadata. And I'll give you another example right now. Because metadata is a whole separate subject. Show them how potentially they can utilize metadata to organize their department or company documents, in this case, policies. And instead of browsing through folders and trying to find the right document, all the user has to do is just type in the metadata term, the tag, and I always compare this to shopping on Amazon, where you pretty much you have the key filters on the left-hand side, and you have your search results in the middle, in this case, documents. Maybe another thing you might want to show them is how they can manage projects in SharePoint. So maybe, show them how they can have a dashboard of all the different projects within the organization, organized through metadata, of course, and how each project will get its own little space or, SharePoint site, unique SharePoint site with its own unique look and feel and security, and how they can once again manage content, manage projects on the site, on the sites, manage documents through metadata. They can manage milestones, organize contacts. They can even organize their tasks through this nice looking task list. They can even utilize Microsoft Project to manage the tasks in SharePoint. So once again, if your users are not familiar with any of these capabilities, you really need to, I think you kind of get the message. You need to educate your users about all the different capabilities of SharePoint, version control, check in, check out, et cetera, et cetera. So I think you get the message. The bottom line is you really need to show all the different capabilities to your users, so you have a little bit more, intelligent business requirement session down the road. And you don't have to get fancy. Once again, I've shown you an example of the environment, my own environment. You can either rely on, the videos that exist out there on internet. Maybe you can quickly create your own test sites. You can do some sort of online webinar, informal lunch and learn. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a very lengthy phase at all, but it is critical that you do have the space to educate your users about capabilities of SharePoint. A question that I just received from Julius, I think I kind of answered that already. Is that demo we could use to show our stuff? Should we build a demo? I guess, you can probably Google and find out tons of videos that explain, all the different features of SharePoint. I always kind of recommend maybe building your own little site if you have if you're knowledgeable enough with SharePoint, because you do want to address the particular business needs, particular business case of your user, particular pain points, I should say. So yeah, I do recommend maybe building your own site and just showing off. It doesn't take that long, trust me. So, but you will definitely, gain a lot from doing that. Good question, Julius. All right, let's move on. So here's now let's jump to the second phase. Now that we educated our users, let's gather some requirements. And here is the thing about this particular phase. Do not ever go into this lengthy business requirements gathering sessions. Do not ever really sit down and start putting a complicated business requirements document. The only time you really need to do that if you are building a custom application, a complicated application in SharePoint with some really complicated workflows or functionalities. If you are really just provisioning the sites add in, if you plan to add out-of-the-box web parts, document libraries, task lists, etc., you really don't need to document anything. I mean, don't waste your time, trust me. What I usually do with my clients is I provide this list of questions that you see on the screen. And really, the idea behind these questions is just to get a high-level idea of what are, I guess, the pain points, what is the business problem you're trying to solve. And when you get the answers to these questions, it will give you enough information to at least build a mock-up in your environment. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on this, I guess, slide. I have written a pretty detailed blog post, and you can link to it from the handout that you will download, where I do provide those same 10 questions, and I do explain, I guess, the reasoning behind each of those questions and why it is important to get an answer, etc. So, but these are usually the questions that I present to my end users when we, for example, talk through the HR side or something, or project side we're trying to create. Okay. All right. Let's keep going. All right. So the information I have on this slide is very dear to my heart because my background is also in project management. Do not, and especially this, I think this is true for any kind of, meeting or any kind of implementation, but especially true, I think, with SharePoint implementations. As I mentioned previously, do not set up extremely long meetings or business requirements gathering sessions. All you need to do is really just get these questions answered, and you can do this in under an hour just by talking to your users. Okay. Do not, as I mentioned previously, do not create detailed specification documents. This is just not necessary. This is a waste of time for you and your users. And also, do not meet more than 2 or 3 times to gather requirements. Once again, if you are just really migrating documents, if you are just building regular out-of-the-box web parts, you can get that information in the first meeting. There is no need for you to meet 2 or 3 times and ask the same question over and over again. All right, so let's talk about the next phase, phase number 3, information architecture. And this phase actually involves several different things because this is, I guess, a project by itself. So let me explain. But this is really the phase. So once you get through your initial business requirements session with your users, once you get those 10 questions answered, you kind of get to understand the high level idea, behind what is it that you're trying to build, what the future might look like. So this information architecture phase is where you do several things. This is where you kind of determine what is it that, what your site hierarchy will be, what your security model will be, who will have access to the site, who will not have access to the site. This is also the phase where you kind of determine, what kind of content will be eventually migrated to SharePoint. So let me first start with, so there are many definitely a lot of kind of moving components included in this phase along, but let me explain what you see on this slide. So on this slide, you see pretty much a site architecture diagram, a diagram of what your site collection might look like when you actually build it out. For this particular stage. In this case, this is an example of a project management portal where you have a home page with where you have your project templates and project dashboards sitting, and then you have all the different project sites sitting underneath. But no matter whether you're building a PMO site collection or maybe your intranet site collection, you still need to go through this exercise and at least understand the initial site hierarchy you're going to build. So definitely, and you can get as fancy, you can get fancy and maybe use Visio, but you can use other tools to kind of document that. But I think this is necessary piece if you want to make sure that everyone is on the, kind of same page exactly what's going to be built and how it will be built. So you do build your hierarchy, but then you can also specify who will have access to each of the sites, who will not have access to, other sites, etc. So everything is nice and clear to your users and yourself included. Also, what you do in this phase, in the information architecture phase, that is you need to categorize your content. So let's pretend we during our initial implementation, we implement an HR side or policy side or whatever it is. Well, you know what, at the end, we also need to migrate our documents. But I bet your current documents right now are organized in file shares and, mixed, files and really complicated folder structures. So this is the phase where you really need to categorize your content. And you really need to break out this different files and folders into separate buckets and really determine where each of these slices will go into SharePoint. Once again, right now, maybe you have all of this, different files, different department files and folders mixed up in one common file share with maybe unique security for different folders. Well, guess what? In SharePoint, the best practice is to manage security at the site level. So at the end of the day, you will really be migrating all of this content to multiple different sites and different document libraries on the site. So really very critical to understand and categorize and do an inventory of all the content you have and really break, at least, organize it a little bit differently, prep it up for migration. So that's kind of the objective of this slide, of this particular step. And another thing that you usually do in this phase is you map your files from file shares to SharePoint. This step is kind of, I guess, somewhat optional, because if you decide to keep your information in folders in SharePoint, I guess the only thing you need to worry about is, where does this stuff go? For example, like I said, you might have right now maybe all the documents sit in the same repository, on G Drive or whatever it is, and maybe organized in different files and folders. But at the end, you really need to map that content to different sites. And even when you land on a specific site, let's say we figured out what the HR content is, we're ready to migrate it. Even on a specific site, you might have different libraries to organize your information. So that's essentially what I meant by this slide when I say we need to, kind of map it to those particular sites. Now, another thing you need to do is you need to define metadata. You need to define metadata for each of these categories. If you are using folders, if you're sticking with folders, you really don't need to worry about that. If you're using metadata, well, guess what? There is no metadata that exists right now. So if you are converting your, let's say, policies from files and folders to metadata, you need to define those metadata tags. And I think I've shown you, I apologize, I keep jumping, but want to show you that example. So here's an example. Let's pretend right now we have policies organized in folders on our network share. Well, guess what? There is no, in our new world, we decided to get away from folders. We're using metadata to stick, to organize our documents. So no metadata exists, I guess, no custom metadata exists out of the box. You really need to define it. This is the metadata that will be unique to your particular organization. So essentially what the purpose of this phase is, this particular step, you need to define that metadata. Once you categorize your documents, you then need to go one step further and figure out, okay, how will my users be searching for the information? What are the different metadata tags I want to create for them? So that essentially was a lengthy description of what this step is all about. Folks, any questions so far? Okay, want to make sure that everyone is clear, so let's proceed to the next phase. All right, so the next phase is data mapping, and I guess I kind of jumped ahead. I already covered that a little bit. So in data mapping phase, so now by that time, we determined what the structure will be, the site hierarchy will be, and maybe what the document libraries we will have in our new SharePoint environment. And of course, at that point, we still have our files and folders on our network shares before we really migrate them. And I'll talk about migration in a second. But before we really migrate, we need to map it, right? So as I mentioned previously, just want to repeat what I said already. We will be mapping, folders that we have to different sites and libraries, but also we will be mapping individual documents to different metadata. Once again, if I go to my environment, back to my environment here, once again, I'm going to use the HR example. If I identify my files and folders, I now need to map those folders to my document libraries on that side. Not only that, if I decide to stick with metadata, I need to go one step further. I now need to define and kind of map each folder, each document to a specific metadata that I will have in the new world. So that's kind of the sole objective of this specific, step. And it is an important step. And there are many different, techniques. If you are thinking of if you're using a third-party tool to migrate, usually they can assist with kind of, mapping things in terms of the templates, to map things from your file shares to your new environment. If you're just doing a manual migration, you can use Excel to kind of organize your file shares and use, different drop downs in your Excel to map to the new sites, new libraries, metadata, etc. So you can be as fancy as you want, but you can be as simple as you want as well, just by using primitive tool like Word and Excel, and just really defining a map. Essentially, this is going to be your roadmap to whoever is going to physically move the file. That's all it is. Okay. Okay, Julius asked the question. I guess there is a confusion between, document type and content type. Julius, this is not something I will be able to answer in this particular session because we probably need much more time to do that. So, but I do cover it in other training sessions and webinars that I offer. So, send me an email and we'll be more than happy to point you in the right direction. Okay. And there was another question, I guess. People want to see how to get to metadata screen, how I got to metadata screen. And once again, I will not be able to explain to you how I set up metadata. I do so in other training sessions and webinars, but I will be more than happy to just show you again what I have set up in here. So I have my policies side, and I don't have any folders. As a matter of fact, people cannot even create folders in here. I'm using metadata, which I have defined upfront, of course. Once again, this is something you will do during the information architecture phase. And anytime a user uploads a document, he or she needs to tag the document according to whatever properties you specify. So, all right. And then once user saves the document, then from that point on, the experience is almost like I said, shopping an Amazon website where you just type in your filter, your tags. I don't need to be, if I'm a new employee, let's say I made it to the site, I don't need to guess, what that other user had in mind when they organized a complicated folder structure. Everything is literally in front of my fingertips. Just by typing in a few criteria, I can find what I want through metadata. And this whole thing about metadata, this is a whole separate subject we can talk about. I'm a big advocate of metadata. I have different webinars and different training sessions on this particular topic. I encourage you to attend, but we can definitely, spend hours and hours talking about that. Great question. All right, so let's talk about, okay, so now we're into a little bit more exciting stuff, phase 5, SharePoint configuration. So this is the phase where you will actually get to build the actual sites and provision the actual sites and document libraries. And as I said previously, even though it says phase 5, it's not like you will be waiting for weeks or months to start building that site. As soon as you gather initial requirements from your users in phase 2, you're pretty much ready just to start provisioning and creating the actual sites. But I obviously wanted to include that phase because you obviously need to build out, somebody needs to build out those sites, create the proper navigation, start building navigation, security groups, document libraries, metadata, whatever it is that you decided to implement. But that's what this step is all about. And as I just said already and want to repeat that again, it's really an iterative approach. You will use, I'm a big advocate of Agile methodology, and Agile and SharePoint, I think it's like marriage in heaven. You definitely want to stick to Agile methodology when you implement SharePoint. That means that you don't have those defined phases like you have with Waterfall approach. Instead, you gather some initial requirements. And you actually start designing. You start designing your sites right away. You start configuring your sites right away. You allow your users to get into your sites, live sites, in your environment, and test them, upload documents, provide you feedback, etc. And then you pretty much, it's an endless kind of cycle. Well, it will have a defined end, of course, when users are happy, but it's always kind of a repetitive approach. You design a mock-up, your users test it out, provide feedback, and you repeat it over and over again. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay. All right. So, and for example, let me just show you an actual example of what I mean. So let's pretend you are designing, the requirement, the site you have in scope is the project site template, the project site that you're creating. So at the end of the day, you might want to create an actual template out of the project site, but the scope for you is to create an actual site, project site that you will enter, convert into template. So every project site is pretty much identical, has the same look and feel, etc. So as stated already, you will gather some initial requirements from your users as far as what is it that they want to do on this project site, manage documents, manage tasks, whatever other types of content they want to manage. And then instead of waiting for hours and hours and having this endless and pointless meetings, you go ahead and build that actual site in live environment. So you create the site, you create your document libraries out of the box, set up some views, etc. And then you allow your users in and allow your users to upload documents and work with documents and collaborate, etc. And then, the next time around, you just improve on the feedback that you hear. For example, your users will say, you know what, it's great that you built me this metadata, but you know what, we could really benefit from another column. And you know what, we could really benefit from another view, maybe. And by the way, we need maybe to also add a task management module and being able to manage tasks through Microsoft project. So it's an iterative approach that you use. I think you kind of get the idea. And you always improve, so what ends up happening is not only you are designing the site, with every meeting, your site becomes better and better, but also your users are empowered because they are using the site at least on a test basis from day one. They provide you feedback, they feel empowered, and also it's a training mechanism as well. Your users get more and more familiar with different features of SharePoint, they ask you more questions, etc. So definitely, the methodology I encourage you to consider when you implement SharePoint. Okay, so let's talk about the phase number 6 now. So now we built the sites, everyone is happy, the sites look great, now it's time to migrate. So here's the question that I always get from clients. How do we move our, whatever, 170, 200 gigabyte file share to SharePoint? And the short answer is you do not. And here is the reason for that. And this is the reason. Okay, if you have a lot of junk in your current file share, or maybe you're migrating from an older version of SharePoint, you really do not want to move it into a new SharePoint environment because you're just going to be recreating the same nightmare that you currently have. The analogy that I always use is if you move from one house to another and you have a lot of garbage and junk in your first house, well, guess what? I mean, it's just going to be the same exact situation in your new house as well. So the bottom line, you really need to clean up the junk first before really migrating documents to SharePoint. At the end of the day, it's very rare. I mean, you really don't want to convert SharePoint to your G Drive or to your file share. Because most of the time, these file shares contain a lot of information that are kind of, is kind of archived that no one will ever need to have access to. Also, especially true with file shares and folders, you definitely have a lot of duplication in place. So it's very likely you have a lot of files and folders been duplicated over and over again, and you really need to clean that up. So at the end of the day, you might be migrating just a subset of information anyway. But obviously, so I wanted to have those couple of slides for you to make sure that you understand that you really need to clean up your junk first. And I've written a detailed blog post on how to migrate to SharePoint, the different options available to you on how to migrate to SharePoint. I list all 4 in here, as well as some limitations, I guess pros and cons as well as limitations, but I definitely encourage you to follow the link and check out this blog post where I talk about all the different techniques you have available, all the different limitations you have. Obviously, the technique you're going to choose will depend on the volume you need to migrate, whether you are converting to metadata or not, and many other factors. So definitely encourage you to check out that blog post and make a decision for yourself that is correct for you. Here is a slide that I usually show to my clients, and I'm really serious about it because I think this is, in reality, this is the most inexpensive migration tool you're going to have. And once again, the message here is you really need to do your homework. You really need to clean up the stuff first. Do not just drag and drop every single file or folder you have in your file share, because at the end you are just going to be, it's not a storage limitation. You have, everyone has 1 terabyte of, I think, of storage in their site collections these days. It's not a problem with that. The problem is you are just recreating the mess for users that you had in the first place. Okay. All right. So, and there was a question early on in the session about the limitation, about different limitations. There is a lot of great information on the web. You can Google the information about the different limitations of SharePoint as far as number of, sites you can have, number of items you can have in the document library or a list, etc. But the most famous of them all is this 5,000 item limit in a list of a library. It's not actually a limit on the number of items you can have in a library. It's a limit on how many you have to query at any point to display the information to the user. So I have written a detailed blog post, and I have actually a slide deck on SlideShare. And if you follow that link, you will get to that blog post and slide deck where I show the 10 different techniques on how you can mitigate, how you can kind of go around that 5,000 limit issue. But definitely this is one of the most famous limitations out there, and definitely something you have to consider especially when you move those big file shares to SharePoint, because you will absolutely run into this issue if you exceed the number of items in the library, and you definitely need to be educated, and you need to educate your users about that as well. So once again, for the purposes of the time and the topic of this webinar, I'm not going to spend any more time on this particular subject, but feel free in your spare time to check out that slide deck and educate yourself about this particular topic. And the last phase is phase 7, training. And just like, all of the phases are important. And I said, phase the education phase, the very first one was kind of the most important. This is probably equally important and as important. If you have gone through the pain of all those different phases, if you've gone through education phase, business requirements, configuration, metadata, mapping, migration, and you failed to do this training phase, you failed. Your implementation has failed. And your real training is absolutely a required element of any implementation. So if you're implementing a project side or HR side, at the very end, once you go through all the phases, you need to do training. The next stage you're doing, the next few sites you're rolling out for different sets of users, you implement those sites again, you need to do training again. And the reason is because, first of all, you might be dealing with different users to begin with. Second thing is, it's not just about technology. Each site has its purpose. You do certain things on the HR side, you do certain things on the project side. You do need to educate your users not just about the technology, but the new business process they're going to use. And lastly, the reason why training is absolutely mandatory is because SharePoint is not Dropbox. Let me demonstrate this to you. So let's pretend you created this nice looking project site. You added all the web parts, etc., but you didn't do any training. As I mentioned previously, your implementation will fail if you allow your users to start using the site, because look at this. If I click on the these three dots next to the file name, these are all the different things I can do to the document. I can download it, I can open it up two different ways, I can share the document, I can delete it, I can look up version history, and I can also check in and check out. I can also set up an alert on my library. I mean, these are not the things that an average user would know. And if you really provision the site, if you fail to do any training, you will quickly discover that this whole the site, essentially your implementation will fail. That your users will not use the site correctly. They will not know what to do, etc. So, long story short, you do want to definitely spend some time with your users and explain to them the different capabilities of SharePoint, how to check and check out the files if that is necessary, how to look up previous versions, how to restore an older version, how to set up an alert on the document library or a list, how to manage tasks using MS Project if that's a requirement. So this takes time, and definitely I do encourage you to invest that time with the users. You don't have to get really fancy here. You can do informal lunch and learns. You can do the trainer approach, where you train maybe a power user from each department, and they do the rest of the training. I do training. It's completely free training that I run every single month, and I will be talking about that in a second. There are also many other resources available on the internet. By all means, do consider training, and not only consider that you actually must do training each time you roll out SharePoint sites to your users. And something I already mentioned, I guess it kind of as a final slide to this phased approach discussion is that do not really use Waterfall methodology. Do not use Waterfall methodology when you implement SharePoint. You really need to stick to Agile methodology, hear constant feedback from your users, and proceed that way. Do not get into lengthy requirements, business requirements, functional requirements, unless you are obviously creating some sort of custom application with complicated workflows, etc. But like I said in the beginning, in the majority of cases, you're really just creating regular sites with out-of-the-box web parts, etc. So on this slide, I'm sharing just a few links. I do have I have written different blog posts related to SharePoint implementation, and this is just the links for you to check out if that's of interest, if you have spare time. Here's the training I was talking about. Every month, I run completely free beginners training. This is not the training where you will learn how to do metadata or how to provision and create sites, but this is the training where users will learn, who are new to SharePoint, these users will learn how to do all the basic things they need to do, like check and checkouts, version control, setup of alerts, views, etc., all that kind of end user beginner kind of stuff. There is a session tomorrow, however, it's full. The sessions usually getting full pretty quickly. I do repeat those sessions every single month, so you can definitely register for May or June session if you wish, and you can check out the schedule on my website by following the link from my slide deck, or just going to my website and following the training link. I also offer power user training, and this is where we go into a little bit more advanced kind of training. This is the more of a site owner, site admin training. This is where I teach users how to everything about information architecture, how to properly set up metadata, different ways to organize documents in SharePoint, etc., and this is the cost for the training. It's $199 per course. So for each of these courses, it's just $199, and it doesn't really matter how many users you have, whether you have one attendee or 15 or 20 attendees, the cost is still the same. So it's a dedicated session that I do. It's a 2-hour training session, and just like I said, it's $199, and essentially for the whole group for 2 hours of training. So feel free to consider that if that's of interest. And as I mentioned already, I do offer webinars monthly. I think the next month we have the SharePoint user adoption webinar, and then in June we have how to manage projects in SharePoint. So this one is usually one of the most popular webinars where I explain all the different options how to manage projects in SharePoint. So feel free to check out the schedule on my website, and I constantly update that schedule with new webinars and new dates. So feel free to register. It's completely free. And this is just information on the services that I provide. And as I promised, here is my contact information. Feel free to check out my website, send me an email, follow me on Twitter, or follow me on LinkedIn, SlideShare, any way you prefer to connect with me. And at this point, I would like to go to Q&A. So let me see. Okay, so one of the questions I just got, which is a very good question from Brian. For a small business, would you recommend setting up a site for each department or library for each department? Our current focus is on file storage. Great question, Brian. Let me answer that. So the short answer is you absolutely want to create a separate site for each department. So if you are moving files and folders and you have and you're moving them to SharePoint, and those files and folders belong to different departments, you do not want to create one site with different document libraries. The best practice in SharePoint is to control security at the site level. So at the end, what you will do, Brian, is you will create a site, and let me just show you another type of site. So maybe HR internal site, let's say. And this will be an internal department site. And this is where you will migrate your documents. And you can stick with metadata, convert to metadata, or stick with folders, however you prefer to do. However, the whole concept behind this is that you want to be managing security at the site level. So this site, each unique site will have its own unique security. So marketing site will have its own security groups and permission. HR site will have its own security and permission, and so on. And the idea is that everything you move into the site will pretty much share the same security as the whole site. So definitely do not make this mistake where you would move all the files and folders from all the different departments into one site. You do need to create separate sites. That's the best practice in SharePoint. And the reason why you don't want to move everything into one site, let's pretend you have 5 or 6 libraries, or you might, I assume, have 20 or 25. If you're going to start breaking permissions at the list or library level, you will be managing security on a full-time basis because you will just get confused who has access to what now. Versus when you have it at the site level, it's nicely organized. You know that, whoever the department is, whatever the department is, these are the people who have access to this particular site, and all this content on that site will share the same security. So great question, Brian. Excellent questions. Hopefully I answered that. Okay. So any other questions, folks? I think we have a few minutes left. Great questions during today's sessions, folks. So want to see if anyone has any last-minute questions before we end the webinar. Okay. I don't see any. That's I assume everyone is good. Okay. All right. All right. Well, I know everyone is busy, so I don't want to hold you from your day job. So once again, if you have your specific questions, feel free to send me an email at my email address provided. We'll be more than happy to answer that question, and we'll be more than happy to answer your question. And like I said, I hope to see you in the next webinar or training session. And thank you very much for today's attendance, and thank you very much for the great questions. Have a great rest of the day. Goodbye.